Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. The numbers of participants are still growing as people are coming into the session. So I'll make a slow start and get more into it as more and more people arrive. So thank you for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is that you are. I hope that you and your loved ones are all keeping safe and well. For the people that don't know who I am, let me introduce myself. My name is Liam Kilby. I am the Associate Director for the MBA Recruitment and Admissions team. And it's my pleasure to be spending probably the next 45 minutes to an hour walking through some general information about the scholarship options and the funding options that are available to people that are applying for the MBA here at Oxford Said Business School. So without further ado, we'll talk a little bit around what today's webinar will cover. We'll have a little bit of information around the application requirements. This is not an application requirements webinar, and so there won't be a huge amount of detail. We'll skim over those in a cursory level of detail so that you can understand what we look for, both in terms of admitting people onto the program, but also what we look for maybe in those scholarship decisions as well. We'll go through some of the scholarships that are available, with a particular focus on a couple of the larger scholarships, and by large I mean both in terms of financial amount that you could be awarded, but also the profile and prestige of the scholarship involved as well. There are other scholarships available to incoming graduate students that can be gained from the wider university that we are a member of and some of its colleges, and so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. We'll show you a few screenshots of the application system so that you can familiarize yourself with where you'll be entering maybe the essay for some of the scholarships that you want to write, where you can make sure you're being considered for all of the scholarships that you want to be considered for. We'll go through some deadlines as we approach deadline 1 for the next academic cycle, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. What I would say, please, if you can, is if you have questions, send them through to the Q&A section of the Zoom controls here, and we'll pick them up as often as we can. If they're relevant to the slide that we're currently on, we'll try and answer them then and there. But as I mentioned before, we will have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end of the hour. So please do send those questions through as and when they arise. And so for people that haven't been to the business school before, this is us. This is the location, the building. You can see here, it's a relatively modern building, kind of in contrast to some of the older architecture you'll find in the wider university. And we're showing this slide because it really is two different worlds that you'll be a member of if you're successful in applying for the MBA here at Oxford. You'll be a member of one of the colleges. Every MBA student is. That college could be anything from a 15th century older building through to a more modern college that was built maybe in the 20th century in the past 30 to 40 years. And there's a real difference there in the college experience in terms of what you're looking for. But everybody on the program will be here at the business school in the building that you can see in front of you. In this building, you'll have your seminars, your faculty lectures, you'll have a library to work in, you'll have some shared working space, you'll have some private working space. There are some catering facilities. There's some nice outdoor kind of grounds that you can sit in when the English weather behaves. And so everything that you'll really need in your 9 to 5 working day will be found and can be found in this building. So moving on to really the crux of what we're looking for, application requirements. And the thing I would say about this slide is that there isn't really one thing that is absolutely set in stone in terms of what we're looking for. So undergraduate degree, you will need one. That is really a prerequisite, but we'll advertise that it should be around a 3.5 GPA. That's the equivalent of a 2-1 in the UK style. And we can take care of transferring your grade over to the UK equivalent. You don't have to do that for us. We'll do that on your behalf in your application. So obviously, your undergraduate degree is a big part of what we look for, but it's also not the only thing that we look for. And there isn't one thing on this list that really is more important than the others. It really is a sum of its parts rather than something that we focus on one particular thing that will stand out for either good or bad ways in your application. Professional experience, we look for a minimum of 2 years of professional experience. That is so that you can bring some experience with you and share those experiences in the classroom with your peers. Also gives you a really good basis and grounding in your career so far that you can build upon with a one-year MBA to be able to make your post-MBA goals that little bit more achievable. We do look for a GMAT or a GRE score, and we really have no preference at all with this. So if you've researched both of those tests and you think one of them suits your skills maybe in a more effective way, it absolutely is the one that you should go for. We don't believe that one is better than the other. They're not weighted any differently. So really do think about which one will give you the best chance of putting your best foot forward and giving you the best score, and that's the one to pursue. References, we look for a couple. Doesn't have to be both professional. There can be one academic, one professional. They can both be academic. I would really suggest that you spend some time thinking about which two people you think you can draw upon that know you in the best possible way and that can talk about your strengths. So it might be your direct supervisor that you've been working with for a number of years. It could be a personal mentor. It could be somebody that has been a previous supervisor but has moved on, or you've moved on. It doesn't have to be that existing relationship. Try not to fall into the trap that some people do, where they think the most senior person that I can find is the one that I should be using. So if I ask the CEO of my company to write my reference, then his or her thoughts will carry more weight because they're more senior. And that really isn't the case at all. We want people that can go into a level of detail about your strengths, about how they've seen you work, either as part of a team, all of the different skills that we look for in a candidate. And they're really the ones that you should be looking to use. With regards to the video assessment, we'll come back to that in a second, just because it's relatively new, came in last year, and we'll go into a bit more detail about that. So we'll move on to the supporting statement. And this is really just an essay. It's 250 words. The subject can really be anything that you would like. But the idea is that you use the supporting statement to tell us something that we don't already know about you, that we can't gather from the rest of your application. So some people might use this to talk about a performance in the GMAT that they think wasn't representative of their strengths. Other people might talk about an undergraduate degree where maybe you didn't quite do as well as you would have hoped, and there are reasons behind that. There really is no wrong answer or no wrong content with regards to what you should write about. My advice here would be make it as personal and as unique as you can. You want to be standing out from the crowd. We have a number of applications each year, as you can imagine, to the program, and sadly not everyone can be admitted. And so being unique and standing out from the crowd is something that you absolutely should be aiming for throughout your application, and the supporting statement can be one idea or one vehicle that allows you to do that. English language proficiency, if English isn't your native language, if you haven't studied a university degree level subject that was taught entirely in English, then you may need to also submit an IELTS or a TOEFL score, and you can find details of what is required and minimum scores on our website. So just quickly back to the video assessment. Part of your application will involve you replying to pre-recorded video questions that you will gain access to as part of your application process. Within that, you'll have a video recording of one of my team asking you a question. You'll have a minute or so to think about your answer, and then the webcam that you're using will automatically start to record, and you'll then record your answer, and that will come through to us directly. There are 4 questions that you'll have to answer, plus 1 written question as well. And these videos are really designed to get you kind of thinking on your feet a little bit, see how well you perform under pressure, but also just see how well you can construct an argument and get to start to uncover maybe a bit more of your experiences. So the first 2 questions are the same for everyone, and it kind of tries to uncover your motivation behind an MBA. Why do you think an MBA is important? Why is now the right time? The 3rd and 4th questions can be a lot more varied. There's a huge bank of questions that we have, and you won't get the same questions as a friend or a colleague or a peer who's applying even at the same time on the same day. It's very randomized. And these questions will kind of interrogate your experiences. So there'll be more competency-based questions. Can you give me an example of a time that you've done this? And that's designed to bring out some of those experiences that you've already had as part of your professional experience. Now, this is a scholarships webinar, as we know, and so parts of this slide will play different roles at different times with different scholarships with regards to maybe being selected for funding. So some of our scholarships will be given out to academic strength. That could be a strong undergraduate degree or a strong GMAT or GRE score. Some scholarships are given out to people who have a certain professional experience. Some scholarships are given out based on region of origin in terms of citizenship. And so what we're looking for here is really a general roundedness of excellence in terms of an application to the program, but the scholarship decision itself will use your application as a base, but will then look at different aspects in more detail should the scholarship require it. There were some questions coming through around this slide, so let me just try and address those now. If you haven't met the undergraduate grade requirement, but you have exceeded the GRE score, can you still be accepted? Yes, absolutely you can. It is a very holistic view that we take with regards to your application. So if your undergraduate degree in this case is maybe lower than you had hoped, but you've done extremely well in one of the standardized tests, I would say that there's an argument to be made that your undergraduate degree, you were younger, you were a different person, there may well have been extenuating circumstances. The GMAT or the GRE is a much more recent snapshot of your ability in terms of academic strength. So that can really work in your favor. There is no minimum GRE score, to answer another question that's come in. We recommend you aim for a score on the GRE of around 160 on the verbal section and 161 on the quant section. So around 321 in total score on the GRE. That is the equivalent to about a 650 on the GMAT. Just making sure there are any other questions. Is there a GMAT waiver? No, I'm afraid not. Everyone is required to do the GMAT or the GRE. And regardless of your background or other professional qualifications that you may have, then no, I'm afraid you will always have to do the GMAT or the GRE. Is it possible to get multiple scholarships? Yes, it is. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. And are there any full scholarships? Yes, there absolutely are. We can talk more about that later too. There are some questions coming through around, can we submit results of tests after the deadline if we haven't received them yet? And I would ask you to please try and make sure that your application is complete before the deadline has passed. There is occasionally a little bit of a grace period that we can sometimes give you. There's a chance of flexibility, but we really are looking for a complete application in terms of all of these components being done and checked off that list before the deadline has passed. Folks, in general, I can see that there are some questions coming through in the chat box. If you can just ensure that they are in the Q&A box instead for me, please, because it's difficult to have all of those windows open at once and I wouldn't want to miss anyone's questions. So please do send them through to the Q&A box and we'll make sure that we can get to them. So this slide shows a list of just some of the scholarships that are available, and it really is just some. There are too many to fit on here. You'll notice that there's a bit of a key. Any blue triangle means that maybe there's a regional or a demographic criteria. A red triangle means that there's additional material required, and that could be an extra essay for the scholarship itself, and in some cases, even an interview to be awarded the funding and be selected. The general piece of advice I would say for scholarships is really do your research. It's really important to understand what you might qualify for and the things that you do qualify for. Are there any extra requirements in terms of submitting materials that you must do in order to then be considered? So generally speaking, the funding at Saïd Business School falls into two pots of money. On the one side, we have scholarships that we control entirely ourselves internally at the business school. The vast majority of those scholarships you are considered automatically for when you submit your application. There's no box that you have to tick. There's no case that you have to put forward to be considered. There's no extra essay you have to do. We'll look at your demographics. We'll look at where you're from. We'll look at your academic strength. We'll consider all of those different factors and we'll automatically include you in every conversation for each one of the scholarships that you meet the profile of. The other side of the coin are scholarships that we have in kind of partnership with organizations that are linked to the university. So for example, second from bottom there, you'll see the Skoll Scholarship. The Skoll Center for Social Entrepreneurship is one of the scholarships we'll talk about in a bit more detail in just a slide or two. But generally speaking, the ones with the red triangle require extra things that you must do. So the Skoll Scholarship does require an essay, and you'll also be interviewed to be shortlisted for the funding as well. And it's very important, if you think that you qualify for these scholarships, that you understand what those requirements are. Is there a deadline for the essay that you have to hit? Do you have to apply to the program in a certain window in order to be considered for that scholarship? So there are deadlines and timelines and extra requirements that it's really important that you understand where you are in that process to make sure that you don't miss out on any potential funding. We've had a question come through. When is the ideal time to apply for scholarships? And if applying in round 3, a second question, is there no scope of scholarships? We will be talking about deadlines a little bit later, but generally speaking, I would say in some cases, apply as early as you can. In other cases, the scholarships will wait until after the third deadline, after January, to see who has been admitted, and will then only start picking who they want to give the money to. So again, it's a case-by-case basis. We'll talk about deadlines in a lot more detail a little bit later on in the session. Just very quickly about deadlines, we've had a question coming through saying it's their understanding that you can apply for any round to ensure that your application is complete. So in terms of admissions onto the program, yes, any round, any application stage is completely fine. We will just understand the caveat around, are some scholarships, are they withdrawn beyond a certain stage? We'll go through that again a little bit later. So we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about a couple of the larger scholarships, both in terms of money that's available, but also profile and prestige. So if people are joining us today that are considering the 1+1 MBA program here at Oxford, then the Pershing Square Scholarship is something that you would be very interested in. It's full tuition and college fees for both years of the 1+1 program. So in this program, you'll do 2 degrees over the course of 2 years. Your first year will be in one of our partner departments around the university, studying a master's degree in a subject of your choosing. The second year, you'll come to the business school here with us and you'll do your 1-year MBA. So this scholarship pays for all tuition and your college fees for the whole of the 2 years, plus a partial living expense allowance for each year on top of that. Now, this is a scholarship that is very competitive. Everyone that qualifies for the 1+1, and by qualify, I mean you've been accepted onto both of your programs, will probably be aiming for this funding. And so just a bit of background about what we're looking for. We need some academic achievement from you. That could be, as we mentioned before, an undergraduate degree with a good result, or a GMAT or GRE with a strong score. We want to see some leadership potential demonstrated through experience and motivation, strong personal character, integrity and commitment, and an intention to focus on addressing world-scale social challenges in your career. Now, that doesn't have to be you are an entrepreneur and you're building your own business. That can be through an existing organization. It can be through a large multinational, but it still should be focused on addressing world-scale social challenges. And part of the interview process, and certainly the essay that you have to write to put your case forward for the Pershing Square Scholarship, will investigate what world-scale social challenges means to you and how you're trying to address them and fix them in whatever sector or whatever region you're working in. Ability to envision how to achieve scalable and sustainable solutions to those challenges, and a vision on how the 1+1 MBA will allow you to do that. So there's an essay that you'll have to write that talks about, why does the 1+1 appeal? Why are you choosing to partner the MBA with your master's degree of choice? And how will those 2 years of education really set you up for success in what you're looking to do post MBA? So again, if you're thinking about 1+1, you would also naturally be thinking about Pershing Square, I'm sure. It's not too early to think about, how am I going to frame my experience? How am I going to talk about what I want to do post MBA in these essays? And more information can be found on our website. Just a quick note here: to qualify for Pershing Square, you have to have applied and been admitted to both of your programs, your MSc of choice and the MBA, no later than the third stage, the January deadline. So the latest you can apply is January. The process takes you through to about March when you get your answer back about your place being offered to you. You have to be in that conversation at that time of year to qualify for Pershing Square, because we then take April and May to shortlist and interview. And if you're only applying for the program in the final stage of the application process, that's around April, you'll have missed the cutoff for Pershing Square. So the January deadline is the one you want to be aiming for this particular scholarship. Jumped ahead a little bit too far there, forgive me. Okay, so the Skoll Scholarship is the second one that we wanted to talk about. This is a scholarship that is designed for people that really are kind of tackling global challenges with regards to social impact. And that can be social impact in any form. It can be an entrepreneur. You could be working at a grassroots level with your own company, tackling a problem or a social challenge in your area. You could be an entrepreneur working for a large multinational, but maybe in a corporate social responsibility role. It really doesn't have to be your own business that you've started, but it does absolutely have to be focused on social change and social impact. So for this one, again, the January deadline is the one you should be aiming for. There is an essay that you must write for Skoll. That essay needs to be included at the time you apply to the MBA. So it's nothing that comes afterwards in your application, and we'll show you the screenshot of this a little bit later. When you get to the funding section, you can tell us which ones you're aiming for, and there's a tick box you would tick for some of these scholarships, and that will allow you to then attach your essay as a Word document. You must ensure that your essays for all of the scholarships that you're aiming for are part of your MBA application. There is not a later deadline for those essays. It's the same as when you submit your application. And there is an additional interview stage that takes place, again, around April, May, June. And so if you're applying in stage one in September for the MBA, you must have your Skoll essay written at that point. But it will then be a few months until you hear back whether you've been shortlisted for interview and whether you've been awarded the funding. It's a full scholarship, so full course fees for the duration of the one-year MBA, again with a partial living expense allowance. And almost more importantly, although a full scholarship is very nice, it's an access to the Skoll Scholar community. And I would recommend, if you're thinking of working within this social impact space, that you look at the Skoll website that has some previous profiles of scholars that have come through the MBA over the past few years, so that you can kind of really understand the profile of person that we're looking for to award this funding to. You can see at the bottom there, entrepreneurial action, creating impact with a focus on changing a system, personal qualities of a social entrepreneur, and that the Oxford MBA is also critical to your career trajectory. One impact of Skoll that some of the other scholarships don't have is that there's a real financial need basis of who it gets awarded to. So, for example, if you're an entrepreneur, you have a small business that's fighting social change in a certain part of the world, and the financial drain of an MBA means that you almost can't afford to come, because it will mean that your business will either stagnate or just have to stop. Then that's the kind of thing we're looking for with regards to scholars. It might be that you've put all of your disposable income, all of your savings into your business to help it grow, to help it keep going, and you just don't have the money left to afford the education. That's the financial need that I think Skoll is really looking for with regards to who it awards this scholarship to. So my piece of advice for this one is go onto the Skoll website, have a look at it, make sure that you can understand the profile that we're looking for, and the essay prompt for this year will also be on there as well. And so you'll be able to get slightly ahead of the game and start thinking about the kind of response you want to put in your essay to give yourself as best a chance as you can possibly get. We had a question: is the Skoll Scholarship also accessible to applicants to the 1+1 MBA program? Yes, but only for your MBA year. So in your MSc, when you're in Oxford for year one, just before you join us for year two, you might want to put yourself forward for Skoll in that 12 months, and that is something that you can do. How many students pursue 1+1 each year? It's a good question. It changes each year. I would say over the past couple of years, we've had about 100 applications to the 1+1 specifically. The number of people that get admitted into both programs can vary because there's a whole range of programs you can partner the MBA with, and so it's not always the same numbers. I would say anything between 20 to 30 new 1+1 students probably join their respective cohorts each year. Out of that 20 or 30, and that's probably the most we'll have. Sometimes it can be as low as 10 in any given year. On average, how many people apply for Pershing? I would imagine everyone that applies for 1+1 also applies for Pershing. That would make sense. I don't know why you wouldn't. With regards to how many scholarships are awarded to Pershing, we have generally 5 or 6 full scholarships for Pershing every year, and about 5 or 6 full Skoll scholarships given out every year as well. If a candidate accepts a small scholarship early on, does that prevent the candidate from being qualified for a larger scholarship later down the line? Absolutely not, no. Those scholarships may not stack up together though. So if you're giving maybe, let's say £15,000 from us internally, from the pot of money that we control, and you're then given a full scholarship from Pershing Square or from Weidenfeld or from Skoll, we will probably let you know that we're taking back the £15,000 because you no longer need that because everything else has been paid for by the other scholarship. So it doesn't preclude you from being considered, not at all, but those scholarships will not stack together. In some cases, smaller scholarships, maybe 10 from somewhere and 15,000 from somewhere else, they can stack, but anything that involves a full scholarship or a larger chunk of money will not be allowed to be stacked with a smaller amount that you've had at some point elsewhere in the year. Good question regarding when will we know if we have got a scholarship. So if you apply in stage 1, you'll have your interview, you'll have your decision, your final admissions decision, and we're hoping that on the same day, you'll also have a decision about have you been awarded a scholarship. Now, if it's not the same day, it will certainly be within the same week. So you'll get your news about being admitted and your news about scholarships very close together. What I would say here is that one of the benefits of applying early, and we'll talk about this in just a few more minutes, is that if you're unsuccessful with a scholarship in stage 1, if we think that there are stronger candidates that we would like to give funding to first, your name is brought back in every subsequent round of applications. So in stage 2, we'll bring your name back into the conversation and say, can we now give you some funding? And if it's still a no, we'll bring you back in stage 3. Can we now give you some funding? So there's a real benefit to applying early, even if the initial round of scholarship funding doesn't go your way. You will be in every conversation we have from that point on. Good question regarding the essays due at time of application submission. Does the MBA Admissions Committee read the scholarship essays as well, or are they just passed on to the scholarship office? We may well read them because it's just interesting to kind of flesh out your application and understand a bit more of you as a person. That's really important to us. It doesn't really form any part of whether you're admitted onto the program because the essay is designed to really talk about what the scholarship is looking for and how the scholarship can help. And as such, it is a little bit separate from is this person what we're looking for in an MBA candidate. So yeah, there's a good chance we'll skim over them. There's a good chance we'll read them. The rest of your application is read cover to cover by the admissions committee, but the scholarship essays generally are for the scholarship committee, a separate group of people to really study and understand where you're coming from. Hopefully that answers your question. Just checking some other questions, make sure that I haven't missed anything. What is the percentage of people attending with a full scholarship compared to the number of people funding the program themselves? Forgive me, I don't have exact numbers. I would say, let me answer this in 2 ways. Generally speaking, about 1 in 3 people on the MBA in any year have some form of funding that is not self-funded, but funded by a scholarship or a bursary or some funding options. So 1 in 3 gets some level. How many of those are full scholarships? Well, we have the 6 Pershing Square, we have the 6 Skoll. Weidenfeld is essentially a full scholarship. There's normally 2 or 3 of those. I would say no more than a total of maybe 15 people across a class of 320 have a full scholarship, but about 100 of those people have some form of funding. So it's difficult to say. I would say 1/3 get some funding support, 2/3 probably have to fund it themselves through savings, through a Prodigy finance loan. Some of those people may be sponsored by their company, but about 1 in 3 generally have some funding support, I would say. Good question. Has scholarship money or financial aid been affected by COVID? And no, absolutely not. So a lot of the scholarships that we have are kind of granted to the business school in perpetuity, or at least as long as the deed of gift agreement is in place. And all of these scholarships have been endowed for a number of years. So these scholarships will not change. We're actually in the process of adding a couple more scholarships to the list that we had a few slides ago. One is specifically for women. There's a gender requirement question that's come through. Are there any gender requirements for any of the scholarships? We have some scholarships that are designed to attract the strongest female candidates. We have some scholarships that are specifically aimed at the LGBTQ community. And so there are new scholarships coming through every year, all the time. So it hasn't changed. It hasn't been affected by COVID. This money will be, thankfully, will be around to give out for the next few years at least. Will an MSc from another university work against your application for the MBA? No, absolutely not. In some ways, having a master's degree already in a related field can show us that, you know, we can see that you can handle the level of graduate study that you need. It's not a mandatory thing to have, but it's certainly a nice thing to have. It certainly does not get in the way at all. For the Weidenfeld-Hoffmann Scholarship, it says one must return to their home country after their course. Is it possible to still work in London or Europe for 2 years prior to returning home? This is a good question. Part of what the scholarships are looking for will differ for everyone. For Weidenfeld, as you rightly say, they're looking for you to take your expertise back and help your local community, your home country, with problems that are happening in that region. Now, I'm not on the Weidenfeld committee, and so I don't have any real say in terms of who is awarded that scholarship. I would be very careful in your application that you make sure that you meet the requirements and the expectations of the scholarship committee. There are some very strong candidates that I know would have qualified for Weidenfeld and may well have been picked for Weidenfeld, but they stated that they weren't looking to return. So they are looking for everything that they list. Now, far be it from me to tell anyone what to put in their application, but the scholarship committee will go on everything that you tell us. We go on the information you give us. If you tell us that you're looking to return, we'll assume that you are, and we'll include you in that conversation. If that situation changes, if you can't return, if you change your mind, frankly, once you're in the program, if you've been awarded the scholarship, we can't take it off you guys. That scholarship isn't going to go to anyone else. So I would read the requirements of the scholarship very carefully, and I would position your application in a way that allows you to be considered for all of the ones that you think you're a good fit for. Please don't think that I'm telling you to mislead us. I'm not. You have to be honest in your application. That is fundamental to success in your application. But just understand what the scholarship committees are looking for and make sure you tick those boxes. Okay, and so here we have kind of a search engine that is available on our website, and I can make sure that this link gets maybe copied into the chat box so that you can see this. But this is essentially your first port of call for understanding what scholarships might be available. It's on the Fees, Funding and Scholarship Search link that you can find on the General University of Oxford website, and it's really worth your time. This is something that you'll be able to kind of put in your own details. So you'll have a few drop-down menus that you can fill in. The most important thing here is that you choose Said Business School as the subject area. If you have maybe a dual nationality, you can search for each nationality, but you'll have to do them one at a time. You can't have a multiple choice, but it allows you to understand, does one nationality allow you to qualify for funding that maybe another nationality does not? That might influence which nationality you declare first on your application to the program. Once you've filled in all of these drop-down menus, the next screen will look something like this. It lists all of the courses that the business school has on offer. You'll choose the MBA. That's with the tuition fee for candidates that are starting next month. Be aware that the fees will increase every year. You choose a subject that you want to study, and then you're looking at things like this, and this will bring up a list of scholarships that you are eligible for based on the demographic that you've put into that search function. So for this person, for this exercise, we found 13 scholarships that were found for a new student studying an MBA, which require you to submit a separate application. So that's the key thing to think about here. This search engine will list just the scholarships that you need to do something extra for: an essay, an interview, a deadline you have to hit. All of the other scholarships that you will qualify for, again, you'll be automatically considered for when you apply for the program. So this will bring up everything that has an extra requirement. And this is the screen you'll want to spend some time making sure you understand that Skoll, for example, the second one down, has a closing date of 10th of January. And these are last year's dates for people looking to join in this September, but it will be January again in 2021. So that's going to be coinciding with our third deadline in January. So this is a really good tool to get to the bottom of which scholarships you think you might be a good fit for, exactly what the amount will be, and anything in terms of what those extra requirements are with regards to essays and applications and interviews. With regards to applying to the program, we've got a few screen grabs of what that looks like. And the thing here to talk about is just that funding section. You can see it's circled in red. And when you click through to that, this is when we were talking about things where you can upload your files. So again, Oxford Pershing Square, that's 1+1 MBA only. This will only appear if you've chosen the program as 1+1 in the screen prior to this one. Skoll at the bottom, you can see there that the essay questions are there to download for you to get ahead of time and get some practice in regards to answering and how you want to phrase them. You'll have to upload your essay as part of your MBA application in order to be considered for each one of these scholarships. So again, these are just scholarships that require those extra components that these other ones do not. Some of them also ask you to tick a box. So Weidenfeld, we had a question about Weidenfeld earlier. You'll also have a Weidenfeld tick box to tick, and the Weidenfeld Scholarship and Leadership Program essay to upload at the bottom of the screen. So it's important that, again, you take some time to understand, have you met all of the requirements with regards to have you submitted the correct things? And my team are very well placed to answer any questions that you might have about, I just want to make sure that I've got everything that I need in one place. Liam, can you run through the application with me? We can absolutely do that for anyone that would be interested in that level of service. So just reach out to us at any time and we can walk you through this hand in hand to make sure that nothing is missed. And so deadlines, we'll go back to some questions that we had a little bit earlier on. On the screen, you can see some deadlines that are happening in this next academic cycle. Stage 1 closes in the next couple of weeks, and all of these stages will give you access to the MBA or the 1+1 MBA from September 2021. So in terms of being admitted onto the program, you can apply in any one of these stages and be considered for next September. With regards to scholarships, the pot of money that we control internally in the business school, we will start to hand that money out from September this year. So as soon as stage 1 closes and we've done the interviews in that stage and we know who has already been admitted, we will consider those people straight away for some of the funding that doesn't have a deadline, that does not have any extra requirements. And so if you think that there's a particular fund or particular pot of money that you would like to aim for that we control, stage 1 obviously has some real benefits. Having said that, we also make sure that we keep some funding back for the further stages. So that we had a question earlier, if you apply in stage 3, does that mean that the scholarships have gone? And no, absolutely not. We always have some funding that we control in all 4 of these stages. You can even apply in April next year and you could still benefit from some funding that we have that we can control. The things to remember here is that those external scholarships like Pershing Square and Skoll, they do coincide with our January deadline. So if you're aiming for those and you apply in April, you've already missed out. The deadline has already passed. What I would also say is that not everyone accepts the offer that we extend to them here at Oxford. It's a competitive world. Other business schools might well be able to help you meet your needs in a more effective way. That's the nature of the environment that we work in. And so sometimes we'll make an offer to a candidate that includes a scholarship and they choose to go to another business school. And so that money comes back to us that we can then think about giving out to somebody else. And it's a very organic piece of work that over the course of the next 12 months, we'll often see scholarships come back and we'll reallocate that money to someone else. And they may well come back a second time if that person also goes elsewhere. So the message that I'm keen to get across here is that if you're not successful with a scholarship at the time that you apply, there is a very good chance further down the line that we might have some good news for you. So it's very important to speak to your recruitment and admissions contacts and let them know of your circumstances. We look for a number of things when we hand out the funding. As we mentioned before, GMAT scores play a big role in some of the academic merit scholarships. Your nationality or your citizenship, your gender, those kind of things can play a role in some of the other scholarships. Not all, but some of them. So there's really a really large choice of funding that we can pick from when we allocate money to people that we think meet the criteria. Just going to read a few of the questions that have come through, just to make sure that we're answering everything while we're on this deadline page. Just bear with me for one moment. Is there any age limit for the scholarship? No, not at all. There's no age limit for the MBA, frankly. What we'll ask you is to talk about your experiences. We'll ask you to talk about what you want to do post-MBA, and we'll align your experiences so far with a one-year MBA and what you want to do once you've graduated. And as long as that makes sense with regards to what you're aiming for, there really is no age limit at all. Like, if you're towards the upper end of the experience range, on the MBA, we have people with 2 years experience, that minimum that we talk about, all the way through to maybe 12, 13 years of experience. If you're towards the top of that range, we might ask you to consider what cohort do you want to be surrounded by? Will you gain value from a cohort of 320 people that are all actually quite junior to you in terms of their experience? What can you learn from them? It might be that an executive MBA might be more suitable for you in terms of your learning style. But other than that, if you come to us and say, Liam, the one-year program is the one that I think fits my profile the best, fits my goals in the best way, then absolutely apply. And there's no age limit, and there's no age limit for the scholarships either. When will the scholarship search page be updated for 2021, 2022? Good question. That will be hopefully in the next week or two. Please keep on top of that. And if that does not happen, then feel free to send me an email and I'll chase it up for you. Is it possible to have a detailed profile evaluation? Yes, there is. Thank you for the question. If you head to our website, there is a way that you can let us know of your interest. There's a very short kind of online form that you can fill out. That profile review will go through to one of our team, will be assigned to the team that looks after the region that you're in, and they'll be in touch to set up a conversation with regards to your profile. So please follow that path if that's something that you would like to explore. We've had a question around deferring. This is a good question, not massively scholarship related, but let me address it because I think it is a good question. Some students who were accepted to join this year's MBA program have deferred to start next year due to the pandemic. Yes, absolutely true. Assuming some of those students have scholarships awarded, would that perhaps affect the number of scholarships available for next year's batch, as well as the number of students accepted into the MBA? Some very good questions. So let's talk about scholarships first. Anyone that had a scholarship to start in September this year that then asked if they could defer by a year will not carry their scholarship over with them. They forfeit the right to have that scholarship if they defer. And so they will be eligible again next year, and they may well be considered again next year, but they'll have to face everyone else that's applying for the first time in the next few months. And so that isn't a guaranteed thing that they will automatically get that money back. That was made clear to them when they took the option of deferring. So in terms of scholarships, it has no bearing whatsoever. The pot of money is as big as it's ever been, and none of that money is earmarked in advance for anyone that's deferred. With regards to the number of students accepted into the MBA, yeah, I'll be frank, we've had more people defer than we probably would have in any standard year for obvious reasons. We start off this year's cycle as we go into stage one in the next couple of weeks with maybe more spaces filled in the class than we normally would have at this time. Having said that, there is still a lot of space left, guys. We haven't had dozens and dozens of deferral requests. We've had some, and we've had more than normal, but it's not a huge number. we still absolutely want to see as many people as we can apply and find the real quality that we know is out there for this next cohort. So please don't be put off at all by thinking there is less space in order to be successful and be selected onto this year's class. We do have more deferrals than normal, but it's not going to get in the way in any way at all. But very, very good question. Thank you very much for bringing that up. I really appreciate it. Let me have a quick look. Is there a big difference in the amount of people that get funding between stages 1 and 2? No. So the amount of people that get funding, there's a difference in the number of people that apply. Stage 1 is relatively quiet, maybe 250 applications, thereabouts. Stage 2 can get up to close to 400 applications. So the number of people that get funding will be different, but the proportion of how many people get funding from those that apply is the same, if that makes sense. So there'll be more people in stage 2 that get funding, but that's because more people have applied in stage 2 and there's more people to pick from. But the ratio is consistent across the first 3 stages. All I would say is that ratio drops in stage 4 for obvious reasons. Some scholarships have expired, and so there's less funding to give out. And so fewer people in stage 4 will get funding. I would strongly recommend, if you are thinking that funding is an integral part of being able to get onto the MBA, that you do not wait for stage 4, simply because there are fewer options left for us to give. Let me have a quick look. Is demonstrating the full tuition fee sitting in a bank necessary for the MBA admission? Good question. So we will not interrogate your means of payment at any stage until just before you're due to join. The financial declaration, which is a piece of work that you provide to us that shows how you plan on paying for your MBA, is required around July, August, this time of year before you start in September. It doesn't have to be that you can show us a bank statement with £60,000 in it. It could be a loan agreement in principle with a Prodigy Finance or other loan providers. It can be a combination of, here's my credit card that I can put some of my tuition onto, here's some savings in my bank, here's a loan agreement for the rest. It can be any combination of things, but you will need to demonstrate that you have the means of payment before we can let you join the class. And that's part of the paperwork that comes a long time after you've been admitted. So it's not part of the admission process, but it will come up later on in the cycle. Yes, good question. So the next steps with regards to scholarships specifically, as I've said before, absolutely research your option. There is a whole list of scholarships, and we haven't really today covered the options that come in the wider university and some colleges. So as you know, as I mentioned before, you'll be a member of one of those colleges. Those colleges themselves will have scholarships available for incoming graduate students that aren't linked necessarily to the MBA, but you could qualify for because you're going to be a member of that college. So if you have a particular college in mind, research that college as well and think, does it offer a graduate scholarship that I could qualify for that might help fund my MBA? They have their own websites, their own web pages, their own scholarship funding searches, and so you'll be able to do some research there. But it is a level of research that will pay you back. The more time you put into this, the more you can understand what scholarships are available, the more you'll be able to position yourself to be well placed to receive some form of funding from us. Listen to this webinar again. It's being recorded. We will send it out to all people that have signed up to attend. If you haven't been able to make it today and you're listening to this at a later date, it's good to have you on board. If you have been able to attend and you just want to listen to it again, feel free. You will have that option. Any further questions, please email us, the team here at Oxford MBA at sbs.ox.ac.uk. And just be aware that successful candidates will be contacted by the financial aid team, as I mentioned before, shortly after the admissions decisions are sent out. We're going to try and bring that together to be on the same day. In some deadlines, that's easier to do than others because the volume of applications we get in January, for example, is much, much larger. And so the admissions piece of work happens first, and then the scholarship piece of work happens in the following week. So there may be a few days between those two decisions, but generally it won't be happening at the same time. Once you've received an offer of admission onto the course, you'll get access to the post-offer intranet site. It's worth checking that on a regular basis because as we get new scholarships throughout the year, and we will have several new scholarships come up this year, both internal scholarships and external scholarships will be listed. And so you'll be able to think, oh, there's a new scholarship that's arrived. I think I could qualify for that, but I need to write an essay. then you can get on board and do that straight away. So it's worth just keeping proactively on top of your post-offer intranet site to make sure you're up to date on all of the different offerings that we have. And that's the end of the session in terms of the things that I'm going to share with you on the slides, folks. But if you do have any questions that you haven't had answered, please do send them through. We can still see some coming through now. I think I've got to most of them. This is a really good question. Laura, thank you for this question. If you get an offer for the MBA, but not a scholarship, and you need a scholarship to be able to come, can you wait on accepting the offer until you hear if you've been awarded a scholarship at a later round? In principle, yes, you can. So generally speaking, you'll have your offer of admission, and we give you about 35 to 40 days to pay your deposit and secure your place. However, that deposit is non-refundable. And if you think, well, I'm not sure that I can really afford to come yet because I haven't heard about scholarships, I don't particularly want to pay a non-refundable deposit until I know, then just get in touch and say, look, I'm hoping for a scholarship. I didn't get one in the stage that I applied in, but I'm hoping that maybe later in the year that I will. We can be very flexible about your deposit deadline based on a number of things, and scholarships is one of those things. They'll get to a point in the year where we think, look, we have to get you to be a member of the college. There's some post-admissions work that we have to do to get you ready for September. You have to give us that financial declaration. You might have a student visa that you have to arrange. You can't do any of those things until you've accepted your place. So there will be a line that we'll have to draw, maybe around June, that says, I'm sorry, if you haven't had a scholarship by now, we still need an answer from you. But if you apply in stage one, essentially you can have from September, October, all the way through to March, April, May, and then pay your deposit then. So just get in touch if you think you're going to have some difficulties, if you haven't been awarded a scholarship. And for the people that are aiming for Skoll or Pershing Square, by the nature of that process, you'll have to wait until April or May anyway to know if you've even been shortlisted for interviews. So we don't expect anyone to pay their deposits that are waiting for a scholarship that has a dedicated timeline to it. How much is GMAT score correlated to the university scholarships? For some of them, quite highly. You know, if you look at the scholarships that we have, if you research them on the website, a lot of them will say demonstrate academic strength. Academic strength could be an undergraduate degree, as I've mentioned before. It could be a GMAT score. Please bear in mind that we in the business school value GMAT scores differently from different parts of the world. Traditionally, we'll see regional patterns where we think some parts of the world, a 700 in the GMAT is actually about median. It's the middle of what we would expect. A 700 from another part of the world is in the top 3 or 4%. And so it's not just a headline, what is your number, but it's also what is your number and what region have you come from and what opportunities have you had to be able to improve that number. So again, I use that word holistic a lot, but it is a very holistic view of who you are as a person, as an individual candidate, rather than just us finding an Excel spreadsheet and sorting that GMAT column and saying, well, anyone below a 700 isn't going to get a scholarship. That does not happen. So it really depends on your individual profile. Let me just double check. I think that might be all of the questions, guys. I'm very sorry if we haven't been able to get to all of them. We have had a few come through in the last few minutes, but we are slightly running out of time. If you had questions that we weren't able to answer, please do email them through to us at the email address on the screen that you can see in front of you here. We'd be very happy to take these conversations further and answer any general questions around the application process or scholarships itself. Thank you for joining me today. It's been great to have such an engaged audience. I hope it's been a useful session for you. Good luck with your application, either that's in the next couple of weeks or later on down in this recruitment cycle. We'd love to see it come through, so please put as much effort as I know you will into it, put your best foot forward, and hopefully we'll be speaking to you in an interview for a place on the MBA sometime soon. But that's all for now. Thank you for coming, and we'll speak to you later.